So Genesis 14 was super interesting to me, and we're going to go through it. We're going to talk about it. Before I start talking about it, I just want to have a little disclaimer. I have not studied the word in school or anything. I'm just a normal person reading the Bible, and so I probably mispronounce everything. There's a lot of names in here that I know I'm going to mispronounce, so I just apologize to anyone who does know how to pronounce these names ahead of time. So verses 1 through 7, I had to read it several times, and then I just thought I need to write this down so I can see it and kind of make sense of it. So Amraphel was king of Shinar. Arioch was king of Elasar. Kedorlaomer was king of Elam. And Tidal was king of Goyim. And they warred against Bera, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemeber, king of Zeboim and Bela. So there's a war between 4 kings against 5, and they're going to war. And if you remember, Lot separated from his uncle Abram in the previous chapter, and Lot, when I first read this, I was like, oh no, Lot is in Sodom. So we're going to find out what happens to Lot during this war. So they joined forces in the valley of Siddim, which is the Dead Sea Valley. They were subject to Kedorlaomer for 12 years, but in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year, the kings allied with Kedorlaomer and defeated the Rephites, Zuzites, Amites, and Horites, along with the Amalekites and the Amorites. But then in verse 8, it talks about how these kings had war, and the war ensued. So the valley of Siddim had tar pits, and some men fell into them while some men fled to the hills. And that's verses 10 through 13. The 4 kings took all the goods of Sodom, and it's talking about the king of Shinar, Elasar, Elam, and Goyim, these 4 kings on the left. So the 4 kings took all the goods of Sodom, Gomorrah, including Lot and his possessions, because he lived in Sodom. So the area that Lot lived on, where they had more people, essentially, because there's 5 kings on that side of the war, they lost. And it sounds like that these 4 kings took the possessions, and they took Lot and his possessions, which is crazy. So verses 13 through 16 talks about a man who escaped. So it sounds like a man that was taken along with Lot and his possessions. He escaped somehow, and he found Abram, and he informed him of what happened with Lot. And Abram had a lot of allies, and he called in 318 trained men. So a lot of people. And it was trained men. It wasn't just men, any men. They were all trained. And it said that he recovered Lot and all his possessions, women, and other people. So Abram heard about Lot, and even though Lot was a little bit selfish in their last encounter, and he said, I will take all the good land for myself, Abram could have gotten mad and remembered that and said, well, Lot's on his own. He wanted that land for himself, right? This is what happens. But no, Abram didn't do that. Abram actually was a good family member, a good friend, and he went and got Lot back. And not only did he get Lot back, but he got all the possessions, the women, and people that were with him as well. So that was really awesome. Verses 17 through 20. After Abram defeated Kedorlaomer and the kings, the king of Sodom came out to meet him. The king of Salem was a priest of God Most High, and he blessed Abram. So because Abram helped them, he went ahead and blessed Abram. And Abram could have taken advantage of that, but let's see what he did instead. So Abram got blessed, and then he gave back 1/10 of everything. And that is so powerful. God wants us to give back to him. And I know tithing could be a touchy subject. Some people say, well, you know, there are no rules when it comes to Christianity and we don't have to give. But the fact of the matter is, it comes from God, right? Your provisions come from God. So we have to give it back to him. And it doesn't matter if, you know, well, I don't want to give it to this church because I don't think they'll have good use of it. Or I don't want to give it to, you know, I don't know who, you know, is going to take the money and do good with it. You're giving back to the Lord because he gave to you. That's what Abram did. And that's a perfect example of it. He got blessed, and instead of keeping everything, he gave 1/10 back. And I think that's super significant. So kind of pray about it if you feel like God has been wanting you to give, and especially in tithing. So 1/10 or more of your income. really pray about that. Maybe God is leading you to do that. It's starting in the new year. Start fresh. When God blesses, we must give back a portion. Verses 21 through 22. Abram was offered many possessions by King Sodom, but Abram declined because he swore to God that he wouldn't accept anything from Sodom. And Abram is maturing spiritually. So I thought those verses were so cool, because if you think about it, if we were offered a large amount of money, right, and items, but God said, don't accept it, because God has a plan for Abram, and he didn't want anyone else to take credit for the path that Abram is going to take, and so Abram, instead of saying, like he has in the past, if you remember in previous chapters, Abram tried to find the easy way out, and he was really, it sounded like he was focused on getting possessions and keeping all the stuff that he had with him, but not this time. Abram declined. He said, you know what? I don't want any of your stuff, because I told God that I would listen to him, and I'm going to do that. So I'm going to trust God for what, he has for my life. And your things don't mean as much to me as, trusting God and following his plan. And that takes a lot of spiritual maturity, to decline the fleshly desires in order to satisfy the spiritual desires. So I think that's so awesome. And you see how Abram has matured spiritually as time went on. And Abram is going through different things. And remember, the Bible is not, doesn't have all the events of, Abram's life. Same thing like I said about Noah. It doesn't consist of all of the tests and trials that Noah had to go through before he got to that point of spiritual maturity and faith. Well, I think it's the same with Abram. Abram's probably gone through not only the things that we've read about thus far, but also just additional experiences that have grown him a lot spiritually. He wasn't even mad at Lot. He went, helped him rescue, and then when it was time for Abram to accept, all of these possessions and things from King Sodom, Abram declined. He said, no, thank you. I'm focused on what God wants me to do. And so kind of hold on to that as we go into this new year. Refocus and align yourself onto what God wants us to do, which is ultimately help bring more souls to Christ, and always continuously find something that you can do for someone else. So I thought that was really cool how Abram is really maturing spiritually. And that's it for this week. Next week, we will go on to Genesis 15. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.